Commissioner General, Kenya Revenue Authority, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by expressing appreciation to the Kenya Revenue Authority for the kind invitation to participate in this milestone celebration marking 30 years of dedicated service to Kenya and to Africa. Unfortunately, due to prior commitments, I'm unable to join you in person today. However, I'm pleased to address you through this video message because the topic of this session, From Dialogue to Action, Government-Private Sector Synergies for Tax and Customs Compliance, speaks directly to the heart of Africa's fiscal transformation and to the Economic Commission for Africa's mission to help countries mobilize their own resources, strengthen institutions, and finance their development sustainably. Excellencies, we meet at a time of profound global disruption. Across the world, economies continue to grapple with the lingering after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, intensifying geopolitical tensions and worsening climate shocks. Interest rates remain high, global trade is fragmenting, and public debts are at unprecedented levels. And Africa feels these headwinds most acutely. The continent's public debt reached around $1.8 trillion in 2024, about 66.7% of GDP. External debt service alone approached $90 billion, diverting scarce resources from education, health, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, aid and concessional financing have declined, even as our development and climate adaptation needs grow. Many African countries continue to face borrowing costs that are at least 3 times higher than those of advanced economies, which impairs their ability to refinance debt and invest in productive sectors. In this constrained fiscal space, the case of domestic resource mobilization becomes even more urgent. We must look inward to our own capacities, technologies, and institutions if we are to finance our development. But at the same time, Excellencies, we are witnessing a digital revolution that is reshaping every sector, from finance and manufacturing to agriculture and governance. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, and data analytics are redefining how economies are organized, how goods move, and crucially, how they are taxed and governed. In this rapidly changing context, it is those countries that digitize faster and govern smarter that will be best placed to mobilize resources, attract investment, and sustain inclusive growth. But technology also exposes deep divides. While about 86% of Africans live within mobile broadband coverage, only 38% use the internet regularly, mainly due to cost and limited skills. This raises a fundamental question. How can Africa harness the power of digital transformation to build tax systems that are efficient, transparent, and trusted by both citizens and businesses alike? Excellencies, the urgency becomes even clearer when we consider that Africa's average tax to GDP ratio is about 16%, barely half the OECD average of 34%. Meanwhile, the continent also loses an estimated $88 billion each year through the illicit financial flows. These realities make one thing clear. Without decisive reforms in domestic resource mobilization, Africa remains vulnerable to external shocks, volatile aid flows, and debt distress. Encouragingly, reforms anchored in digital innovations and homegrown solutions are gaining ground. Across the continent, countries like South Africa, Rwanda, Ghana, Uganda, and Kenya are utilizing innovations such as e-tax, e-customs, and electronic invoicing systems to streamline compliance, shorten filing times, and raise revenues. When taxpayers see efficiency, fairness, and service, they are more willing to contribute. This is also where the private sector becomes indispensable. For too long, the relationship between tax authorities and businesses has been defined by enforcement rather than partnership. But when dialogue evolves into genuine collaboration, when the private sector is treated as a co-architect of reform rather than a passive player, compliance improves, innovation thrives, and prosperity follows. So what must we do to move decisively from dialogue to action? First, we must institutionalize structured public-private fiscal dialogue to build trust and shared responsibility. Such engagement enhances predictability, encourages compliance, and promotes innovation. Governments should also establish a taxpayers' day to reward compliant taxpayers and inspire a culture of voluntary compliance as a pillar of national development. Second, we must co-create digital systems that are inclusive, interoperable, and accessible to all. It is essential to bridge the connectivity and the skills gap to enable small businesses, women and young entrepreneurs to participate fully in Africa's digital economy. By aligning national reforms with the AfCFTA's digital trade protocol, we can ensure that innovation becomes a bridge to opportunity. Third, we must invest in people and institutions. Technology is only as effective as those who use it. Building the capacity of tax officials, enhancing digital literacy, and securing data systems are crucial. At ECA, we emphasize that capacity building must be at the heart of Africa's fiscal transformation agenda. Fourth, we must reform financial and credit assessment systems. It is unacceptable that only 3 African countries are rated investment grade. This does not reflect the continent's reform progress or resilience. Africa deserves a fairer, more evidence-based assessment of risk. That is why the ECA is championing the establishment of an African-owned credit rating agency to ensure fair assessments based on performance, not perception. We are also strengthening member states' capacity to enhance creditworthiness, develop domestic capital markets, and prepare for accurate evidence-based credit evaluations that reflect Africa's true economic fundamentals. Fifth, we must leverage the Africa Continental Free Trade Area as a platform for fiscal and customs modernization. The AfCFTA provides a historic opportunity to harmonize and digitize tax and customs regimes. According to ECA modeling, full implementation of the AfCFTA, including trade facilitation and customs digitization, could reduce trade transaction costs by around 14%, boost intra-African trade by up to 45%, and unlock over $35 billion annually by 2045. Through our Digital Trade and Fiscal Systems Initiative, the ECA is helping member states to align national reforms with AfCFTA protocol on digital trade, ensuring that digitization becomes a catalyst for competitiveness, inclusion, and sustainable growth. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the journey from dialogue to action is ultimately a journey from vision to reality. But it requires courage to reform, trust to collaborate, and innovation to sustain change. When governments and businesses work hand in hand, when technology serves people rather than replaces them, our revenues will rise, our economies will grow, and our citizens will thrive. This is how we reshape a future where Africa mobilizes its own resources, finances its own development, and secures its rightful place in the global economy. And the ECA remains committed to working with you to build revenue systems that are efficient, equitable, homegrown, and transformative for our continent and its people. I thank you for your kind attention.